Yeah, okay. Welcome back. Ryan's Thoughts and Cars. I am going to talk about what is now called my red pill moment. Red pill, what was I say, awakening? Red pill. My red pill thing. I didn't know it was called red pill. I didn't know there was anything such a thing. I went about a decade without social media. Like, I just didn't do it. I stayed away from it. I got off it during my separation and divorce. Because, what was going on with me, it was nobody's business, really. That, and, I mean, my ex tried to get me to communicate with her over social media instead of in person and stuff, and I was like fine with that. And then as soon as I tried doing it, she didn't answer anything. She didn't do anything with it. It became, she didn't want to communicate. She ended up saying to communicate through my lawyer. And even doing that, it didn't work. The red pill thing, I didn't know about any of that. It wasn't until, I guess, earlier this year, in December, I guess, I started looking up dating stuff. Because I was interested to start dating again. I had just moved to a new place. I just wanted to figure out what's going on in the real world with dating. Because on the island, it was totally different. If you've watched any of my other videos, I've talked about it already before. It was sane. It was sane. Sort of. Because before moving, I joined, it was after COVID and stuff, and I was like, I gotta get out and socialize again. And I didn't want to do it in pubs and bars. So I joined a meetup singles group thing where you just did activities together. And it was really weird because, well, it was sort of weird, but there was no men at these things. There'd be like 3 guys and like 25 women, which is okay, I guess. I really didn't mind it at all. But what was weird about it is that they were begging men to come. But I was on the island. It was different because that was commonplace. There was more women than men. The men left the island to go make money because, jobs sucked. And there were no jobs for men. It was difficult to make a living. She ended up closing the business. She tried to sell it at the end there. She was always emailing me trying to get me to go out to these events. I guess I was like a hot commodity or something. I don't know. But to be honest with you, the guys that were going to these weren't real solid material anyway. But that fizzled out, of course. So when I got here, I looked up the red pill because I didn't know what it was. And I found out, oh, hey, it's these guys telling the thing about divorce. And I was like, oh, hey, that same thing happened to me like 15 years ago. So basically, I'm just gonna kind of, I don't know. I've tried to make a few videos about this, but I'm not saying things right, and I don't like what happens. So, in a nutshell, the marriage, my wife, my ex-wife, she became unhappy in the marriage, and she couldn't explain why. I couldn't explain it either because I didn't get what was going on with her. She wasn't able to verbalize it, and I'm not a magician or a mind reader. So whenever I tried to ask for specifics and stuff. She just said, I don't know. I did pay to go to counselors and therapists and shit, marriage counselors and stuff. They'd always ask me to come and meet with them and do the couples thing, and I did, and then I was always sent away. She always stayed at therapy longer or whatever, working on something, so I don't know. She never really talked to me about it. I figured, in time she'd talk to me about it, but she never did. So I really don't know what went on in those sessions. All I know is that they were fine with me. What did I do to cause the marriage to fail? I gave her everything she wanted. I said yes to everything. I did not challenge her. I did not question her. I let her do whatever she wanted. I thought that's what, a good husband did, right? And that goes along with the narrative that I grew up with in the social sphere of things. I'm going to turn off the air conditioning. I thought to keep a woman happy, you just give her what she wants, give her what she asks for. Right? Simple. I didn't know that you had to challenge. I didn't know that you had to say no. I didn't know that you had to, keep her in her place or anything like that. And I learned this after, I think it was 2016. So yeah, so after I moved, 5 years after I moved, I went back to school. I went to school, not back to school, but I went to school, and I went to go get my master's in clinical psychology. And it was there that I learned, a lot about human behavior, a lot about my own, and not so much what make men and women tick. Because even there, I was still getting the bad advice up until I moved here about how men and women, what women want and how you're supposed to treat a woman and things like that. It's all a lie. When I figured it out, so it was after the divorce, and I had this. I had this was the second long-term relationship where the woman did weird shit, stuff you're not supposed to do. First one cheated on me. I'm not getting into that. But my ex-wife, so she was a single mom when we got together. I knew her ex, and I was at her son birthday when he was born. Gave him his first teddy bear. We were all a big group of friends, sort of thing. We all knew each other really well, and we all hung out with one another. But when she ended up breaking up with him, and suddenly both of us were available, and I had always put her off. I always had interest in her. Well, I shouldn't say that. In the beginning, I had interest in her, but then I put it to the side, saying, no, that's my buddy's girlfriend. That's off limits. That's a no-go. You never do that. And I was already in my 30s by this time. I met her when I first went to high school, and then a few years later, again, I found out that she was my buddy's girlfriend, and that's when I said it's a no-go. But I was really attracted to her and the whole thing. So I went about 10 years. Yeah, easily 10 years. Saying, that's a no, right? But in that time, I kind of grew up. The pool was shrinking of people that are available, and we knew each other really well. And I never got the signals from her the entire time that she was interested in me or whatever. That she was interested in her man and making that work and all of that. So, looking back on that at the time, I was like, oh, this, she wants to be, in a long-term relationship. She wants to be a mother. She wants to be a wife, sort of thing, right? But it didn't work out between them. And suddenly both of us were available, and we got together. We started dating, and we started talking about kids and marriage and the future, and that's what we did. Now, I don't know, I'm not going to get into all of that. I was a yes man. Basically what it was is I was a simp. That's new in my vocabulary since January. I was a simp. I thought I was manning up. I thought I was being responsible. I thought I was taking on, the work of all the other loser men, kind of thing. Looking back on it now, it was a false narrative. It wasn't. In theory, it sounds good, or it did sound good at the time in theory, but in practice, it doesn't work. It does not work. Any young guy watching this, don't do it. Just run away. Don't do it. No. The thing is that when she came back, I was treating it platonic. Like, we were just friends. We were just hanging out. Just because we had known each other for so long, and there was a long history of us just being friends, right? Now I know the truth. I was in her, call up later books, because it wasn't until then that she started to show attraction to me, and I was kind of weirded out by that. I'm like, aren't we just like friends? Like, aren't we just hanging out? Aren't we just like grown up? Men and women can be friends thing. But no, she showed interest, and I was like kind of overjoyed about that, because for a long, because I really was interested in her a long time ago. I did find her attractive in the whole thing. All right. So after the divorce, probably, I don't know, it was about 3 years after that I had this deep-seated hatred of women. I did. Like, women were evil. And I knew that wasn't the healthy take on it. That's just how I felt, right? And I remember saying that to myself, like, this isn't a healthy way to look at this. Like, eventually you do want another partner, or life partner, or marriage, or whatever, right? Whatever it turns out to be. You can't go around with this, hatred of women. So to figure out where, what, how, and what's triggering it, and this and that and the other thing, I started dating again. Not to take it out on women, but to learn about myself. With women, how that all worked, right? And how I was with women, and how they worked, I guess, more or less. And which really helped me, having that deep-seated hatred of women, because I went into the dating thing like I've never done it before. Like I never did before. I was always the nice guy. We'll say that. I was always the nice guy. I was always accommodating. I was always chivalrous. I was that guy. It never worked really for me growing up, getting chicks when I did that. But I always thought that was the proper way to do things, right? And that's what women always said. This is how we want to be treated. And so I always do it, and would always wonder why it doesn't work, right? Whenever I did it. So anyway, I had this deep-seated hatred of women. I started dating after my divorce, which really helped me out. And this was the red pill moment, where I figured out how to treat women. How to treat women in a way that is rewarded. Because when you're the nice guy, when you're chivalrous, when you're accommodating, when you're doing all, it doesn't get rewarded. It's ignored, or you're shamed for it, right? So there is no upside. You don't get women for it. You might get somebody who wants you as a easy, free ride, as a savior, as a way out of a situation, which in my case it was, which is what that ended up, what it really was about. That's what she was interested in me for. And I was half decent looking, or whatever. I really don't know. All I know is that she saw me as, kind of a meal ticket, right? As a standby guy. So the red pill moment, how to treat women in a way that they reward, was I did not give a shit. I could have cared less how they felt, what they said, what they looked like, what they were wearing, what they were interested in. I didn't give a flying squirrel about it. I really didn't. I was at, like, I don't know, I was just at that point in dealing with women where, like, trying to get over this hatred, like, I could care less what comes out of your mouth. I could care less about how pretty you are. I could care less about what you believe in. I could care less about what you think of me, really. And by accident, by just having that weird attitude, I stumbled on, like, wow, this really works. This is, I've never experienced a woman treating me a certain way where they're fawning over you. They want you they'll do whatever you say. They will. It was really weird, and it kind of put me off in the beginning, because, if you've ever been a decent guy and you start opening car doors and you start treating a woman really well, especially in today's market, like, I don't know about my age, but maybe younger people, if you actually do that to a woman, they will stare at you, like, they'll say they want it and all of that, right? And so you're doing it. So another simp out there who's listening to this, you start doing that to them, and they don't know what to do. Like, it's a deer in the headlights, right? I've said it before in a video. They, like, what's going on? And they fumble with it, and and that's what I was like. That exact same thing. When I first started doing it, I'm like, what's happened? Like, what? It's like having it's like having a robot following around doing whatever you want, doing whatever you say, giving it commands. It was that weird. And after getting over that, and then starting to play with it, was the funniest thing. Was the funniest thing. One of the funnest times in my life. It was. And I wasn't doing casual sex, okay? I because I had this deep-seated hatred of women, I was like, no sex, because you're not taking it out on another human being, right? Just for that. So I did go through a period of where I was, like, totally hitting on chicks and them really wanting to sleep with me and take me home, and I was like, nope. It was nice meeting you. See you later. Had a great time. And then I wouldn't call them back. And them standing there going, right? So I did I did end up in a relationship with a lady, and it was all on my terms. It was all on my terms. There were nothing about her other than she gets to spend time with me. And I can't remember how long we saw each other. For quite a few months, 3 months or something like that. But I was getting to the point where, the lusty feelings and things, and then talking them down, going, no, this is just lusty feelings, but how do you really feel about this? Like, I was about to go back to school, or start school, and I was like, do I, because, it's a lot of work in a relationship, so am I going to be going to school and working in between and try to keep this relationship going. Like, am I going to invest in this at this, is it worth this time? And I'm like, no, I'm not genuine about it. I really sat down and thought about it and did my own internal check on it, right? And then, to be honest with myself, I wasn't that into her, right? And then, rather than string her along, I made the decision to break it off with her. And then I told this story before in a video, I think. The same night I was going to go talk to her about it, she professed, I'm in love with you. Like, I want this to continue on forever and ever and ever and all of this. And I was like, oh. I don't feel the same way. I'm sorry to let you down. And that's what it was. So that awakening, and I will call it an awakening because my eyes were opened after that. I was like, after breaking up with her, starting school, doing psychology, and then sitting there in the classes and walking home and, thinking about the whole thing, the whole divorce, the recovery, how I, was dating in the past, who I was in the past, how I treated the marriage, how I was in the marriage, and then how I was afterwards, and with my hatred of women, and how that applied to being with women, and how successful that was. I was fed a lie. I was believing in a lie, we'll say that, my entire life about women. And I'm not going to say any one person or any, fed me lies about women or anything like that. I'm just going to say there was a social narrative out there about women being in power. Women, have been oppressed. The patriarchy is, oppressing women and designed to keep women down, and women should be free to choose and do and have and be and all of that. And I believed in it, and I was thinking the same thing. Hey, you know what? I'm more than willing to provide and work and be a father and all of that if my wife is going to stay home and watch the kids. But I'll do the exact opposite, right? Like, if you want to go out there and you be your super feminist, whatever it is, I think now they call it girl boss, where you go out there and you make the same money, where you can have a partner at home to raise the kids and sort of thing. I mean, I was all for that, right? And now I know that doesn't work. It does not work. That just leads to damaged people. Really damaged people. That's not how, and gender roles used to be a bad thing, but no, these gender roles are gender roles, and they're just a label. However, the biology and the biophysiology and the psychology of those gender roles support the gender roles, right? For a reason, right? Now there's more statistics and facts and studies that back that up, right? We humans are not evolving fast enough to keep up with that in order to maintain a species, let's say, right? Because now nobody's dating, nobody's having kids. No, it's gone for shit here in the West. With all this education and with all this freedom for men and women to be choosy and whatever it is, the simple fact remains is that when I did my little thing there about not having any interest at all in women and treating them the way I was taught not to treat women, basically, is how I treated women. I went the exact opposite way. I'm like, well, this isn't working. I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to be like those assholes out here who, take advantage of women and, sexually harass women and the whole thing, right? I didn't do it in school. I did it all before all of that, right? And I just went out into the world and was that guy, I was that guy. I was the male chauvinist pig. I was that, I think that's the label. And I could not believe how good it works. And I look back and to all the men who were that, and how the women always said, nasty things about that. I get why men did that, because it works. If men we're treating women good, I think, because that male chauvinist thing went for a long time in our history. It went for a very long time in our evolution, right? From 300,000 years ago till the when did women start gaining power, like really, or laws were changed where women were really in power and really making laws for women? I would say till at least the 80s. 70s, not so much. There was a little bit. Yeah, I know the women got the vote in the United States in 1919 or something, right? But no. When women started taking over men's traditional places in the workplace and in society, it would have had to have been the 80s, where it was starting basically full force snowballing to now, right? There is no way our physiology, our biology, our psychology can change that fast, adapt that fast to that kind of change that quickly in this short span of time. And it's really showing, right? Like I said, with the declining birth rates and everything, where women are empowered and things like that. I'm not saying women should be kept down or anything like that, right? I'm just saying recognize it for what it is, right? And I think that is happening. Like, women do understand. A lot of women do when you're off the apps and you're off social media, when you're out in the real world, women do understand that. There are the few delusional few still who, like me, believed in the narrative of that, the feminism thing and women in power and women empowerment sort of thing is still out there, but not to the nth degree. There are women who just want to be, led by a man. And it's not, I don't know. And I'll leave it at that. Say what you want in the comments. Leave something in the comments if you want. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to get too deep into that. I'm not an expert on anything. Just a guy sitting in a car, right? Telling my experience. And that would be, that red pill experience, we'll call it that. Back in the day, I don't know, there was no name for it. It wasn't until that, the podcast thing, because it became, it's basically an epidemic, right? Where decent guys trying to do the, decent thing in these marriages, and, women walking all over them and then taking off, destroying families so that they can go whatever it is, right? Because society isn't forcing people to stay together anymore. And that's, it is a good thing on one end, where, women aren't forced to be in, abusive situations, like, literal abusive situations. However, most of the women leaving marriages are not, being abused, right? They're just not happy because they've had to settle, let's say. Or the hypergamy thing comes in. That's, all of this is new to me. Like, these words, this vocabulary, I learned since January. And it's April now, middle of April. The hypergamy thing, I didn't understand, but it makes perfect sense. And there was that study. We did talk about that in psychology. It did come out way back then. And it was about how many partners women have, and how, pair bonding fails after 3, basically. I forget the name of it. Telemann? Something like that. Study. I can't remember what it is. But I do remember reading about that and us covering it in Human Sexuality, one of my classes. Yeah. Yeah. So, now Like I just finished, well, April, May, March, April. It was after the first week of March, I think I quit online dating. I went online dating because I'm out in the middle of nowhere and I don't know anybody, and I just thought that'd be easier. And, you know, I'm in small town, so I really didn't want to go and mess things up in the small town, trying stuff out again. Now, I did, you know, what I did during that dating thing, like I tried a whole bunch of things. I've said that a few times, and you know, I went back and I tried to do the nice guy thing again, just to kill it. I mean, if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. And let's see what happens when you do this. And it was worse than my entire time growing up. At least women, when you did that when I was younger, they put up with it and they would reward it. You know, they would give you a chance. You know, they would kiss you. They'd say, "I'll see you again." They would. You know, you would get some sort of affection reaction out of them. This is when I was younger, right? And you could hold a belief that, you know, you could have something somewhat traditional, I guess, traditionally romantic relationship back in the day, maybe. Well, I'm still lying to myself if I say that, but, you know, it didn't exist then. But at least it was somewhat rewarded, right? Because even if they weren't into you, they would tell their friends, saying, "Look, this is really nice. You should. He treats you so well." And right? Now, no. Now, no. They don't even do that. They just you get ignored, or the behavior gets ignored, or it's an immediate turnoff. And this is with the apps, by the way. It's immediate turnoff, and or they'll shame you for it, right? I just wanted to get it out of the way. Get it out of the way. Beat that dead horse one more time and leave it alone. And then I tried a whole bunch of other stuff because I'm not used to the whole online thing. The game here is really weird. Back on the island, it was pretty straightforward. You use the app to meet somebody in person, and everybody would show up. Rarely ghosted, but doing it this time after reading the websites or listening to videos and things like that on how it's working, you know, how difficult it is for men to get a date. I immediately honed in on that because I'm sales. I know sales funnels, and I just built it for that. And that's all these dating apps. The dating app I was using, the dating apps I was using, that's all I did, right? This is how you get attention. This is so we, you know, funnel these messages back, do this. It all ends up in a date at some point. Do that again, do it again, and set up dates for, you know, like 3 people in a day so that your day isn't wasted. That kind of thing. Which is something I would never have done in my life. And if I was listening to women, like now when I see women's advice to men on dating on YouTube and things, I ignore it. If you're a guy, ignore it. Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a little bit of good stuff coming out now where people are saying the truth like this. The first person, and I'll say it again, Casey Zander came up, and I watched this video and I laughed because it reminded me of that time when I hated, and I did not give a flying crap about anything that women had to say, do, be, whatever. And it worked so well that when I was listening to him, I laughed out loud going, "Hey," I actually showed my daughter, I'm like, "Hey, this guy, this is actually, you know, this is what I did," basically, sort of thing, right? So, but all the other dating guys that I was listening to have now changed their tune to basically what he's saying. There was another guy, can't remember his name, but I started watching him, and he's saying the same things. He does a little bit of he does analysis of what women say, and he gives good advice. I can't remember his name. Anyway, yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And the thing is that I'm going out dating and it's all single moms or older ladies who have grown up kids, sort of. Because what's happening now is that kids can't leave the house. The cost of living doesn't work out, where older kids in their 20s and 25s, kids in their 20s are still living at home. They have to live at home because they can't afford to live on their own, right? And they're not getting married, right? So they're single, so they're not getting married and going off and trying to live a life, even trying to get two incomes to do how they're staying home. So I've got these older ladies with kids at home. Like, this is an impossible situation for dating, you know. Like, I'm not gonna move into some chick's house with her kid living there and right off the bat. Like, I don't know. I don't get this. Like, even my daughter's living at home. You know, this is really, really weird, screwed up situation for dating here in Canada anyway, at 50. I did try dating the 30-year-olds, but I'm like, these people are so delusional. But this is on the apps. This is on the apps. And the other thing I found with the 30s is that they are, well, I'm going to say it's delusional. And even if they don't have kids, because most of them do, most of them have little kids. And I've done that. I've dated, yeah, I've seen, they do weird, oh man. They'll put the kids to bed and call you over. Get their freak on. The 30-year-olds standards are out of whack. And it still falls to, you know, these traditional male role where, you know, you provide, you pay, you meet all my requirements, and mostly it's to pay. Right? Like, if you're not going to pay, like if you're not going to pay, you're not worth my time. Is kind of how it worked out on the apps anyway. Being an older guy didn't matter, but I did feel like they were looking at me as a meal ticket, and I did it both paying and not paying, and I'm getting too far into it. I have my red pill thing. I explained that to you. I'll leave it at that. It's a weird world, and it, you know, seeing the truth for what it is, I think is what this is all about, is what this thing here is all about. And that red pill, whatever you want to call it, right? My awakening for this back in 2013, 2014, when I started dating again. Yeah. So yeah, it's 10 years ago. And then I went into monk mode. After I started school, I just went into monk mode until just before leaving the island. Because yeah, I had nothing to do with women. I completely, no sex, no nothing. I had nothing to do with women. I just did my job. I learned how to live by myself and be okay with myself and that sort of thing, right? I had a bunch of health scares and things like that. And, you know, I was constantly restarting my life. The entire time on the island, I was constantly restarting my life. And that's why I moved. That's why we moved. You know, the cost of living was so high, and every house that we were renting was sold out from underneath us, and we always have to find a new place. And we're constantly moving, constantly. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't do it anymore. So moved to here, started a new life again. 15, 20, 25. That's the story. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.